It's a bittersweet moment as we enter the last day of the 66th ASH annual meeting and exposition, but it's never too soon to look ahead. 2025 holds some exciting milestones for ASH. ASH News TV spoke with the incoming ASH president, Dr. Belinda Avalos, to preview what's in store for the society. Dr. Avalos, we are looking forward to your leadership as the incoming president of ASH. Tell us a little bit about your first time attending an ASH annual meeting and how it's impacted your career.
So the first time I attended an ASH annual meeting was in 1985, and I was a first-year fellow, and I submitted an abstract and was able to present it in a big audience. I think that ASH has been really at the forefront in advancing hematology, and hematology has been at the forefront in advancing medicine in terms of making molecular observations and developing techniques, including multi-omics techniques, that enable us to better understand the pathophysiology of diseases. So I started out doing a small little project, and that then developed into something larger. I got involved with ASH as an abstract reviewer and then as a moderator for a session, and then I was involved in a variety of committees, including the Government Affairs Committee, the Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Executive Committee, and I'm so excited to be coming in as president of ASH.
And how has all of that experience and all of your time here with the society impacted your own career?
I think it's really made my career more fulfilling. So I've had the opportunity to take care of patients, take what I learned back to patients, work in the lab, and I feel like ASH has really made me a better person in terms of mentoring and as a mentee as well. And I feel like ASH really has its arms around the more junior investigators, and that's really important in developing our next generation of hematologists.
There is something special happening during your presidency in the coming year. There's an anniversary regarding the sickle cell disease initiatives. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So the Sickle Cell Disease Initiative really began 10 years ago. In 2025, ASH will be celebrating its 10-year anniversary of its commitment to conquering sickle cell disease. One thing that's new that we've done, will be doing, is the Center for Sickle Cell Disease Initiatives. And again, that's going to be something that will yield really important results about a disease that we've not studied adequately, and where we don't really know what is the best approach. We know we've got new therapies, for instance, transplant or gene therapy. Transplant has been around a long time. Gene therapy was just introduced, approved by the FDA at this meeting. We heard that news last year, so I'm expecting that we'll have more exciting things that come from the Sickle Cell Disease Initiative Center.
Yes, and of course there will be more of that on the website as well that people can find out about more on these centers. So lastly, I would love to know, where do you see the future of hematology? You've been a part of this field for a very long time and have contributed in many ways, but what are you most looking forward to seeing?
So I'm really looking forward to seeing us do things more using all of the omics platforms that we have, and looking more into the effects of ancestry diseases. You know, we don't really have genotype, phenotype information, which we would get, I think, and that's going to be critical as we move forward.
It is exciting, and I'm excited for you for your year of presidency. Thank you for your leadership, Dr. Avalos.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to ASH News TV. I'm Mikhail Sekaris, Chair of the Committee on Communications at ASH.
And I'm Cindy Dunbar. I'm the current Secretary of ASH and the incoming Vice President.
Well, it's with great sadness that I have to say, Cindy, we're on the final day of ASH. But with that, But rather than rejoicing, we are actually thrilled that today is also the day we get to see the late-breaking abstracts. And the late-breaking abstracts, in my mind, is always a little bit of a mystery. What makes an abstract late? What makes it late-breaking? What allows somebody to submit the abstract a few weeks later than everyone else has to submit an abstract?
Well, hopefully it's not just that they were procrastinators and didn't make the original deadline, but you know, it is actually almost 3 months after the initial abstract deadline. And it's, you know, really focused on clinical trials that had readouts that occurred too late for data to be ready for the regular ASH sessions. And also sometimes really exciting late-breaking laboratory findings that, you know, didn't come to light until after August 1st. It is very competitive. It's only 6 abstracts that are chosen for presentation, and we usually get between 80 to 100 abstracts submitted for the late-breaking session, and they're usually of very high quality.
So let's say I'm an investigator on a clinical trial. The data report out let's say September 1st, so I just missed that regular abstract deadline in early August for the rest of the abstracts. I go ahead, I write up my abstract, I enter it onto the ASH website, I hit that submit button. What happens next?
Well, they all come to me to start with, and I just go through them with ASH staff and screen them and make sure they're complete. And they go out to a special late-breaking abstract panel that includes ASH leadership and program committee members that have expertise in a variety of areas. It's usually a panel of about 10 people. And because it's not that many abstracts, we all read all the abstracts and score them. Just like for a regular review, we just sit down and go through and think, okay, what are the highest quality? How do we put a session together where we have a diversity of topics and, you know, truly practice-changing work, as well as, you know, really interesting science. We really do think of the late-breaking abstract session as kind of a second plenary or a mini plenary because the quality is usually very high.
Any thoughts about the late breakers and what we can expect when we see this live?
Well, there's some, you know, as we expect, some really interesting practice-changing work. There's an abstract looking at the role of autologous transplantation in patients with mantle cell lymphoma, particularly focused on whether minimal residual disease can help guide those decisions. That I think will be very exciting. There's an abstract in follicular lymphoma looking at a combination of anti-CD20 antibodies to try to prevent escape. And there's a clinical abstract looking at very long-term follow-up of allogeneic transplantation for sickle cell disease, 10 years of follow-up. And, you know, in a disease like sickle cell where, you know, there's certainly acute complications that occur early in life, the real question for doing an expensive curative therapy is whether or not you're really extending life and preventing complications as people start to reach adulthood. And so I think it'll be really exciting to hear that long-term follow-up data. And then we do have a couple of, you know, translational abstracts. One that's super interesting because I get really altitude sick is looking actually at individuals who live in the Andes in South America at very high altitudes and do not have a high incidence of stroke or other complications of polycythemia that occurs because of hypoxia. And these investigators have tried to find what gene polymorphism might explain that. And they found something, and then they took it beyond that to look in patients with regular polycythemia and see if this particular allele could, you know, explain protection or not from polycythemic complications in people with acquired polycythemia vera. So I'm excited to hear about that.
Well, it sounds like a terrific session. Thank you again for joining me on ASH News TV on our final day of ASH. Everyone, please come to the Late Breaker session. It's going to be just amazing, and have some safe travels home.
The ASH Hematology Inclusion Pathway, or HIP, offers a comprehensive 13-year longitudinal career pathway of awards from medical students to mid-career professionals that strives to ensure that hematology reflects and serves the diverse world we live in. Through HIP, ASH continues to foster and empower a diverse new generation of leaders in hematology.
ASH's program thus far has been absolutely amazing. I have received their Medical Student Award through the HIP program. They've provided me a bunch of support in terms of mentorship career-wise and the opportunity to present at ASH itself. And I think it's been really useful for me to get experiences in trying to see both the clinical side and research side of hematology.
The Novartis-sponsored WAHIA clinical trial is currently enrolling in the United States. WAHIA is a phase 3 study of ianalumab in patients with warm autoimmune hemolytic anemia who failed at least one line of treatment. The primary endpoint is the achievement of durable response for at least 8 consecutive weeks between week 9 and week 25 in the absence of rescue or prohibited treatment. Visit the Novartis booth number 2529 for more information.
Race and ancestry have historically not been well considered in both clinical medicine and basic fundamental research. This session discussed how hematologists can improve their interpretation of clinical diagnostics based on race and ancestry through the interpretation of neutropenia.
There's a whole lot of considerations about diversity, genetic ancestry, and how they interact with clinical diagnosis, how we interpret blood counts, and how we make decisions about managing serious conditions such as leukemia.
Our goal is to highlight the importance of consideration of race and ancestry as we model precision medicine and develop precision medicine approaches. So both from a clinical standpoint, translational standpoint, and from a basic research standpoint.
The E. Donald Thomas Lecture and Prize recognizes pioneering research achievements in hematology that have represented a paradigm shift or significant discovery in the field. This year's presentation focused on the important topic of hematopoietic stem cell maintenance.
I gave some examples of recent work from my lab studying the intrinsic and extrinsic mechanisms that regulate hematopoietic stem cell function, both in terms of new discoveries related to the niche for hematopoietic stem cells, as well as ways that we activate the stem cells after erythropoietic stresses.
The Blood Journal studio has been buzzing with exciting news this week from several ASH publications, from journal launches and tips for authors to collaborative interviews between editors of ASH News publications and peer-reviewed journals. The Blood Journal studio is your place to interact with ASH's editorial leaders. I'm joined now by Editor-in-Chief of ASH Clinical News, Dr. Aaron Gertz. Dr. Gertz, how have you been covering the annual meeting this year?
So we have a lot of coverage of the ASH annual meeting this year for 2024. We're super excited to bring the latest and greatest in hematology to your front door. We're covering here on-site coverage with our emails, our print that will be out in the January issue, as well as a collection of videos that you'll be able to view online once they're produced. ASH Clinical News has a clinical focus, both taking translational science, but like condensing it down for the clinician. We also have an outward focus, right? We want to reach everyone outside of ASH membership. We want to reach people in industry, advanced practitioners, those oncologists, or even practicing general internists out there who may be taking care of patients with blood disorders. Our magazine is written by staff writers, people who are scientific writers who aren't necessarily hematologists. And I think that helps us translate the science of hematology so everyone can understand it. We want it readable, for anybody who might pick up the pages of ASH Clinical News.
This also marks the 10-year anniversary of ASH Clinical News. What are you doing to celebrate?
Well, in addition to lots of cake, we're super excited to bring some reflective information to you. So in the December issue of ASH Clinical News, we have a reflection on how things have changed since 2014, both in ASH, in the world of hematology, and just pop culture in general. The piece I really like is a reflection from the past editors-in-chief, where they look back of how the magazine was brought together, how's it impacted them, and the world of hematology in general.
ASH News TV also spoke to the editor-in-chief of The Hematologist.
We were very fortunate that we have almost 20 plus years of history with hematologists. So what we have been doing is going back to the issues from the year 20 years ago and looking at what were then considered to be the cutting edge. Then we also introduced something called not so benign. We realized that there can be catastrophic, life-threatening consequences even for those classical hematological disorders. And this particular set of articles is focused on bringing to the forefront, what are the dangerous aspects of some of those classical hematological conditions.
Patients with high-risk LBCL may need an alternate direction for frontline therapy. What if we can offer patients with high-risk LBCL another path at diagnosis? Research is ongoing. Novartis is investigating a first-line approach for patients with high-risk LBCL. Learn more at booth number 2529.
ASH continues to focus on sickle cell disease priorities. This special interest session focused on how voxelotor's withdrawal influenced the management strategies for patients who were prescribed the treatment.
On Wednesday night, I started to get some emails from my colleagues saying, "Did you see the voxelotor withdrawal?" And for most of us, it was completely a surprise. Really had no idea this was going to happen. And a lot of chatter, talked to them on the phone, a couple of my colleagues, and then the next day we were making plans on how we were going to do this with the people we take care of. The sickle cell disease research priorities were recently revised, and those disease priorities really cover various aspects of sickle cell research. I was most involved with the organ dysfunction group, and in that group we really recognize that there are great gaps in what we need to know. We all recognize that there's still great unmet need in sickle cell disease, both for drugs and curative and transformative therapies, and this situation where we get stuck holding the bag when a drug gets pulled off the market makes that need all the more acute. On the website there are a lot of resources. There are 5 practice guidelines that were developed by ASH that cover end organ function as well as transfusion therapy and other therapies for sickle cell disease like bone marrow transplant and curative therapies. And those are updated on a regular schedule. And then there's a lot of resources for training. There's a fellowship classical hematology program that includes a lot of sickle cell modules. There's the Sickle Cell Centers workshop, which is really designed to train. Then I think there's also this great sickle cell community. So there's the Sickle Cell Consortium that ASH is really the convener for that meets, and they have focused a lot on global sickle cell as well as clinical research and community outreach.
ASH has a strong focus on developing mentorship in hematology. This early career development session gave trainees insight into some of the tools and resources readily available to them through ASH.
What's fun about this particular talk is that each talk we get a PhD scientist and a clinical investigator to speak about how they've developed their mentor and mentee relationships. And that was really important for us to focus on the mentee as well, because we find that sometimes it's very obvious how to be a good mentor because there's a lot of literature out there, but there's not so much literature about how to be a good mentee. So we're hoping that the participants in this particular conference will learn a lot, both from a scientist perspective and from a clinical investigator perspective.
ASH has had a long-standing collaboration with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to bring important, late-breaking announcements and updates to attendees at the ASH annual meeting. On Monday morning, the joint ASH-FDA session focused on accelerating drug development for hematologic malignancies.
We really focused on what needs to be done from a trial level and individual level data collection to support the use of minimal residual disease as an endpoint for hematologic malignancies, discuss the challenges and possible ways to overcome them in more complex diseases such as AML and also in lymphoma. And I hopefully the community got an understanding of what FDA is requiring for these tests from an analytical standpoint to support their use in clinical trials.
Now, we are here at the DEI Networking Luncheon with Dr. Noha Saror. ASH's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion includes embracing and supporting diverse voices across the hematology community. Doctor, why is it so important to foster a sense of support and community within the hematology field, particularly as it relates to people with backgrounds that have been underrepresented in hematology?
First of all, thank you for having me today. It's such a great pleasure, and we're very excited to our event happening today. For the importance of inclusive networking in the DEI committee or community in hematology, it's very important because it brings more ideas, more collaborations. It makes people feel more represented, having a voice, being heard, connect with each other, and hence improve their chances or opportunities to foster their endeavors or their career goals. Patient representation matters too. So having diverse workforce would help having better outcomes for our patients, having more enrollment in clinical trials, better patient outcomes, and of course having a diverse team would help retaining the more talented people in the workforce, and at the end of the day it's helpful for everyone.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for all the work that you are doing to create a more inclusive community. Thank you for spending some time with us here on ASH News TV, and continued success to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Novartis-sponsored VAHIT-1 and VAHIT-2 Phase 3 studies in patients with primary immune thrombocytopenia are currently enrolling in the United States. VAHIT-1 and VAHIT-2 investigate the addition of ianalumab to standard first-line corticosteroids and second-line thrombopoietin receptor agonist therapy, respectively. The primary endpoint is time from randomization to treatment failure. Visit the Novartis booth, number 2529, for more information.
The Ernest Beutler Lecture and Prize honors two individuals, one recognized for enabling advances in basic science and the other recognized for using clinical science or translational research to carry the basic science advances through to tangible improvements in patient care. This year's recipients presented on controlling hemoglobin genes and curing hemoglobin disorders.
What I summarized in the lecture was what we have learned about the mechanisms that control the repression or the turn-off of fetal hemoglobin and how we can genetically manipulate cells to turn hemoglobin F off or on, and in this case reactivate fetal hemoglobin for therapy in sickle cell disease or beta thalassemia.
What I did was to narrate a 30-year history of trying to develop gene therapy for sickle cell disease. We had lots of roadblocks along the way, and I showed many of those and the ways that we persisted in getting around those to the point now where we finally have 2 FDA-approved gene therapies for this really horrible disease.
The new Quality Improvement Champions Initiative replaces the retired Choosing Wisely Champions and Guideline Implementation Champions. We spoke with the chair about what types of quality improvement projects are considered for this award.
ASH recognizes healthcare providers, practitioners, nurses, trainees, allied health, who are doing these types of programs in their institution, and we want to learn from them. And they're really aimed at making healthcare better.
I think it's a good example of how, in a multidisciplinary approach, you can actually implement change through quality improvement. And I'm hoping that being highlighted here is going to help other people get inspired to do similar things for this patient population across different centers.
Our time in San Diego is coming to a close.
It is, but make sure to mark your calendars for the 67th ASH Annual Meeting and Exposition taking place in sunny Orlando, Florida, December 6th through the 9th, 2025.
It's been a pleasure bringing you daily highlights on ASH News TV, and we look forward to doing so again next year.